Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Batista. He has 40 years experience in law enforcement and most recently was the Chief of Police for Santa Monica PD in California. Welcome to the show, Chief Batista. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Paige, thank you so much. It's a great honor and amazing opportunity to chat with you and all of your followers on this really important topic. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. When we talked offline, I got really excited because I didn't know that you started in my state. And so we had a lot of similarities with, some of the agencies that you've worked with. And, obviously you're kind of in my area. So I'm really looking forward to sharing your experience and your insights with everyone who's listening. But I was hoping that we could start with a little bit of background on you.
Sure. I am probably one of those quintessential chiefs that you've had that have spoken about wanting to be a police officer when they were just children. And I am one of those. I can remember maybe at the age of 10 thinking about the fact that one day I wanted to be a police officer. And from that moment on, I did everything I could to make sure that I never got myself in trouble and that I was always going to be ready for that time when it was time to get into the police academy. And I had the opportunity to fulfill that dream as a 22-year-old in Tucson, Arizona. And that's where I spent 3 decades of my career working in Tucson and just an amazing opportunity that I worked in every area of operations. I finally retired after being the assistant chief in both the investigations division and in the patrol division. So an amazing career. From there, I left Tucson to become the chief in Mesa, Arizona, so 100 miles away in the Phoenix Valley. Amazing police department. I got the opportunity to lead them for about 2.5 years, then retired just before COVID really started in 2020. And my friend and I then had the opportunity to write a book together because there was really not a lot else
Mhm.
going on during that period. And very successful 6 months of a lot of hard work in getting that book off the ground. The book is titled Do No Harm, a visionary title about what we should be doing or trying to do in policing. I figured out from that point that I was not ready to retire fully. And so I started the process of getting back into policing and feel entirely fortunate that I became the chief of the Santa Monica Police Department in October of 2021. And that was about 4 years of amazing work in a really terrific community and a really good police department. And I look back on the work that we've accomplished together in areas like Tucson, Mesa, and Santa Monica, with just a deep respect for all the people that are out there doing the work every single day, like today. And so just honored to have been a part of that and now continuing to look forward for the next chapter of my life.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I'm really envious of anyone who knows what they want to do at such a young age and has that direction because I was really the complete opposite when I was younger. I didn't have direction, and I think that that got me into trouble. I was kind of just aimlessly wandering as a kid, and I always wished that I had, something that I knew I wanted to be when I grew up. And so, one of the things that you told me that really stuck out when we talked offline is, you've been in this career 40 years now, and you said that it feels like yesterday and that it just goes by so fast, but that you still have the energy and the passion for this profession. And I'm really curious how you were able to keep that energy and keep that passion over a 40-year career.
Yeah, it's so true. You're right. From the very get-go, I was never one of the kids that was wondering about what they were going to do when they were teenagers into their, what they're going to do with their life. I always knew. And I don't know how to explain what that fire is that I've had inside of me that says, this is the profession that I want to be in. From the very beginning, it wasn't really about leading people for sure. It was all about, the excitement of being a police officer in the field. And as I grew, though, as I matured in the role and as I climbed the ranks, I realized the importance of good leadership. And so that began to be my driver of how to make policing better for the people that are in it and as the profession delivers its service to our communities at large. And honestly, I don't know what that thing is inside me. It is described as maybe a heart of service, right? Which we've seen in so many people. I think about that when I think of folks that go into the military and their service career. There's just something inside us, and there's young people every day that are born with this heart of service. And I think that I was fortunate enough to be one of those from the very beginning. And how I keep it going today is that I I don't know. I mean, I don't think you're ever going to run into anyone that knows me that says, God, Ramon's really beginning to slow down. He's not as enthusiastic about this profession as he once was. It's because I just still believe that in this profession of policing, there's always so much more that we can do, both internally and externally, right? Internally, the work of taking care of our workforce so that they can be at their very best just never ends. And then conversely, the work of going out there and delivering public safety and public service to the very best of our abilities, that just never ends. Like there's never a plateau that you get to and you finally think to yourself, oh, you know what? We've arrived. We're as good as we're ever going to be internally and externally. There is just not much more else. I mean, never, right? It
Yeah.
is it is a profession where you just constantly have to strive to move forward. And I feel fortunate to think that way. Always thinking far down the field about like what can we do better and how can we improve on all those qualities. And it just keeps me going. I wish I knew what the secret is to that.
One of my mottos or philosophies in life is if you're not growing, you're dying. And it's not meant to be morbid, although I know it kind of sounds that way, but it's this idea that um, and I love that you said, we don't arrive somewhere. It's the idea that there's never a destination, right? There's always opportunities for growth. And I talk about this a lot because I think sometimes we think that there's only opportunities for growth and failure. But I really believe that even if you're really good at what you do and you did a great job, you can still always try to improve yourself. And when we have that mentality, I've arrived, and this could be professionally, but this could also be in our personal lives. If we're like, yep, I made it, that's it, that's when stagnation starts to happen, right?
Sure.
That's when like we start to fall behind. And so that's what I mean by if we're not growing, we're dying. We're kind of falling behind, we're creating that stagnation, whether that's professionally or personally. And so I really like that you said that, like, how do you keep going? How do you keep improving? How do you have that mindset that there's always ways, and it doesn't have to be huge strides. It could be little baby steps or that, rule of 1% of like, how can we always be thinking in that growth mindset?
I just came back from the International Association of Chiefs of Police meeting in Denver, and I could see the shift, right? We were in the last couple of years talking a lot about wellness and resilience, and that's still a very important topic. As a matter of fact, in this last one, I saw a lot of conversation around the stress that organizations bring upon their members.
Mm.
But I also saw a an effort around talking about technology and AI coming into the workspace, and how are we going to deal with it in a law enforcement profession like ours to make sure that we don't misuse it, that we don't shy away from it, that we embrace it and figure out how to apply it carefully so that we're successful going into the future because obviously it's coming and there's no avoiding it. So it was interesting to attend IACP along the same lines of what you're talking about, continual growth and understanding of the landscape and what our profession is facing. I feel as though you're going to be running into very few police departments nowadays that don't understand the importance of wellness and resilience because without our members, without our officers and professional staff, this work can't be accomplished at the best level that we want. And so we should never take our foot off the gas in that respect. But it's also important to be thinking about the whole scope of what's coming our way with technology. And I think it's going to be revolutionary for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a whole nother podcast that we can have is talking about technology because I agree with you. I think I've had a lot of conversations of people who are really apprehensive. There are people who are really excited and embracing it. And so I think that that's going to be interesting to see, what happens in the future.
Yeah.
While you're talking, and of course, I already know a lot of the things that you've accomplished in the wellness space, and I do want to get into that. But for anyone who doesn't know you, I want to kind of maybe dive beneath the surface a little bit and try to understand why is this something that's so important to you?
So it really started when I was a lieutenant. I had a very good friend of mine that was a sergeant, and we had just come off working together on this really big event, and he and I was frustrated at the very end of it because, even though it was hugely successful, thousands of people had attended this multi-day weekend festival, a lot of officers working, and we didn't really have any major issues. And I was the lieutenant overseeing the entire thing over the 3-day course. And then the following Monday, Tuesday, he and I went to lunch, and I was telling him about my frustrations, about how some things had occurred. And he was the very first person that ever said to me, "Hey, something you need to look at and re-examine is your leadership style because you're turning people off." And he was somebody that I really respected. And when he told me that, like it made me stop and pause. And for the very first time as a mid-level manager, like I had one of those moments where I was like, I need to be thinking more holistically about the people that we're leading. And so then fast forward, I became a captain. And it was very early in my tenure being a captain that I was involved in a near fatal motorcycle accident. And I've got to tell you that the the road to recovery during that, where I almost died, out at the road, in the emergency room, and then in the intensive care unit, uh, and then to be able to come back from that, not be able to walk for a while, and then the recovery, uh, navigating this whole thing between just myself and my wife at the time, not and seeing how there was a lack of support from the organization in terms of an organized effort to help me, like, and certainly the command staff, although they had sent some messages, it was not like genuine follow through where somebody was like knocking at the door, calling me, whatever, like that didn't happen. But what did happen is that my very good friends in the organization reached out and made their presence felt. And so I got to tell you that that was really the turning point for me where I thought, hey, I've been given a chance, like not once, but 3 times to re-examine what I am supposed to do in this world. And from that point forward, as a captain, understanding the leadership responsibilities that I had, I really turned the corner on the importance of taking care of others
Mm.
and looking at everything through a lens of care, through a lens of empathy for our employees. Now, trust you me, I never left my values of public safety and going out there and getting the job done, but I really grew in the area, in the arena of the importance of taking care of our folks. And it was really that moment of having myself go through this life-altering event, um, and the 6, 8 months, 9 months recovery period that it took for me to get back really gave me, well, it was a new lease on life, and also with a perspective that was like a clean slate about what I was supposed to do with this gift that I was given, and it was to look after others, and I just have not stopped from that period forward. I just feel as though it's my duty.
I don't know why I'm like getting a little emotional, so I apologize. There's a couple things I want to kind of dive into with that. One, how powerful is it when you have someone who you know is in your corner, who you really respect, to have them call you out in a way where you like kind of perk up and pay attention, and it's not defensive because you know that that person means well and actually cares about you, and you're like, whoa, okay, like thank you.
Yeah.
Like I appreciate those moments so much, and I think the important note is that that person has to be in your corner. Like it can't just be, someone who's just complaining to complain about you, but someone who actually cares about you, for you to kind of be like, "Oh, okay, like maybe I'm messing up in some areas or maybe I can do better and there's room for improvement." But the thing that got me really emotional is that last part that you said, that it gave you a gift. And I obviously in the moment, you know, it doesn't feel maybe that way. Like when you're going through those hard times and you feel lonely and you feel um, hurt and frustrated and all the things, that happen. But for you to come out on the other end and say, wow, that experience, that near death experience gave me a gift. And that's to be able to help other people and to make things better and to try to make it so that no one else goes through what I went through, and no one feels alone, after a situation like that. And how powerful is that, and I know that not everyone shares the same sentiment, but I really believe that we're given hardships and we have the opportunity to choose what we do with those things. And I've said this before, but I do also think the things that I've gone through in my life that have been the hardest things that I've gone through have given me the gift. And I don't think that I would be as passionate about what I do today if I hadn't gone through those things. Do you think that you would still have that perspective today and still have that motivation if you hadn't gone through that experience?
No, not at all. Because although my friend's conversation with me began to get me on a better course, honestly, it wasn't until the accident that I realized that having a new lease on life meant that I had a responsibility to fulfill what I felt needed to be done. And the experience of not feeling the genuine support from the command staff, and now think about it, I am a part of the command staff. And in this situation, in this profession, there are so many opportunities, obviously, where our officers get hurt in their daily work, and they need to know that from the very top and through down to the line level, because they have their peer support system, their informal peer support system. Other officers in the team will take care of them, but to know that all the way through the chief, somebody is thinking about you and says, "Hey, I know you got hurt last night, just making sure you're okay this morning. I'll give you a couple days. I'll call you just to make sure that you're okay." Even for the things that were just like in a, simple emergency room type of care, um, I know that it made a difference in people's lives, and I would never do anything different. But you're right. Had it not been, unfortunately, for this, um, near death adversity that I went through and the pain of coming back from it, I'm not sure if I would have had that enlightenment. To be honest with you, I mean, I don't know if I would have, but for all of it, thank God that I did and I came out okay, and I think that I've got purpose, and I'm following through on that purpose.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask, and you've mentioned this before, and you talked about organizational stress and stress that comes from leadership. And you said that, ICP, you guys are talking a lot about, what it looks like to support wellness and, talking about resiliency and things of that nature. One of the things that I'm seeing, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but and I've talked about this before, and if anyone's listening and they've watched a lot of these podcasts, they might like tune it out because they think it's repetitive. But there's three steps to forward growth or change. One is awareness, which I think you're right. Everyone is aware that wellness is a priority and it's something that should be focused on and that there's room for improvement. And then the second one is education. So, what are those resources? What are those tools? What are those things that can be done? And then the last one is implementation or action. And there really isn't any, I mean, there's benefit in education, but if we're not going to apply it to action, then no one's going to benefit from it, right? And so I find that I think that we're kind of getting stuck in this education phase where we're talking about a lot of the things and there's awareness and there's education and there's a lot of communication about it. But then how do we put that into action? How do you implement these things? And so after your accident, you have this new responsibility and, motivation to make a positive impact and change. What did that look like in action? What are some of the things that you started implementing or focusing on in the wellness space?
So I'll tell you that as a leader, right? At the time I was a patrol captain in one of the really toughest divisions in Tucson, and I made changes to my leadership style. That was the first thing that happened, making sure that I was very connected to our members, understanding their backgrounds and what they were doing and what was going on. That was at the divisional level. Um, as I moved through the organization and I finally got to the point of being an assistant chief, I remember with such clarity that I still cared very, very much about the wellness and the resilience of our members in patrol, especially. And so I would make sure that in the conversations that I had with the captains leading 5 different divisions, that they had that same type of urgency in their care of personnel because it really, really mattered to me. So I would ask a lot of questions and I would dive kind of deep into understanding how the divisions were doing. And I can imagine that back then some of the captains were probably thinking to themselves, man, why does he ask so many questions? But it was because I needed to make sure that it was clear that even as a bureau chief, I wanted to make sure that all the divisions below me understood the importance of wellness and resilience. As I moved on to becoming the chief in Mesa and certainly the chief in Santa Monica, um, I took that to the next level. And I'll give you the most recent example in Santa Monica because Santa Monica is a really great example of a department that had a peer support team. Very good peer support team had been in place for many years. But the one thing that they did not have was that person in the middle that was going to be working on the day in and day out wellness and resilience because the peer support team would come in under critical events, right? Somebody witnesses suicide, somebody sees, or they're part of some kind of critical incident, and the peer support team would come in for the stress debriefing and things like that. But the day-to-day wellness and resilience that I wanted to see within the organization was missing. So finding the right person with the right motivation to lead that team was the first step. And I got to tell you that from the very beginning. I mean, selling this idea within my own chain of command, within the command staff, was something that initially took a little bit of time for them to wrap their head around. But once they did, and once we all started recognizing and seeing that the right person, the right sergeant with the collateral duty of addressing the issues of wellness and resilience really began to pay off. There was a whole slew of things that occurred. We went after wellness grants from the state of California. We went after wellness grants from the federal government and feel fortunate that we secured both of those. One of them that's in place right now paid for a contrast treatment for both the men's and women's locker rooms. So the men's and women's locker rooms are equipped with both a sauna and a cold plunge, both men's and women's locker rooms. The other part of the grant that we received from the Law Enforcement Mental Health Wellness Act are paying for our collaboration with UCLA in a program called Mindful, where we're studying the effects of mindfulness in the workplace with UCLA. The other one is the Power program from the COPS office. It's a Peace Officer Wellness, Empathy, and Resilience program. But in between all of that, um, the Wellness and Resilience Sergeant was putting together physical fitness competitions with the members. She was orchestrating small things like potlucks and barbecues, and all of these things under an umbrella of wellness and resilience and bringing the culture and the teamwork together. And it's paid off dividends because I am telling you, at this point, I've never been in a place where I feel as though the morale is like at such a high level. And through and through, I feel very good about the teamwork and all the work that collaborated around this effort. When you walk into the elevator in Santa Monica, it's usually the employee elevators in the back side of the building, the secure area. There's places where within the elevator you can put flyers in for different events that are coming up. And I got to tell you that it's so inspiring to walk in there and see that there is a yoga class that's coming, to go back there and see that there is a financial literacy class that's coming, or that there is, the latest update on the last physical fitness competition that came up. And all of that points to a healthy organization. And I feel as though I got to see that from the very beginning through its inception and now the results of it in Santa Monica. I agree with you. You know, earlier we were talking about the challenges of implementing wellness and resilience in a large organization.
Mm.
And that can become way more challenging because obviously you have to foundationally work on trust and trust building between the line level officers and professional staff and the command staff, and making sure that you're talking about one seamless entity, and cut down on that gap of distrust that can occur within large bureaucratic organizations. And to your point, I've never lost track of the fact that policing organizations, if you know that's what we're talking about right now, generate the greatest amount of stress. And so the thing that I always had in the back of my mind when I was in Santa Monica was that we were going to be an organization that had little to no drama, right? I constantly thought about the importance of making sure that day in and day out, the officers were focused on the major issues, the major calls for service in front of them, and not any kind of drama that was occurring or brewing in the background of an organization like we have in many policing organizations today. And this is not a small department. I mean, this is 440 or so total members, a good size, good mid-size agency. But that takes intent. Like you have to be focused on making sure that there's transparency and you're building trust and this culture that believes in one another. And something else that you brought up is that everyone has to be thinking that you're there for a purpose that's greater than yourselves, right? So there's a grand mission as to why we're all there. And while we're there, we're doing everything we can as an organization to take care of one another. And that doesn't happen in a vacuum. All the pieces and the parts have to be working together to make sure that you can pull it off correctly.
Yeah, there's so much that you said there that I want to touch on, and if I forget something, please like let me know. But
Sorry.
no, it was great. So I had a conversation one time with an officer that was like tearing up, and they were looking at me and they said, Paige, I've been in this career a really long time, and I have seen the worst of the worst, like out in the field. You know, they're like, and they were really graphic with, the explanation. Like, I've seen this and I've seen this, and, you can kind of fill in the blanks there and imagine what was said. Um, and they looked at me and like tears in their eyes, and they were like, I have never felt so stressed than how I do now with our current leadership. Like, and it was like, whoa, okay. And I'm an outsider coming in. And of course, we've talked about these types of topics. And of course, like you tell me, but I guess I didn't understand the impact until I had someone nearly crying, their eyes out to me, being like, all the things I see on the streets are nothing in comparison to how I feel with this current administration and how I feel like I'm not valued. And it was heartbreaking to see that, and um one of the things that I hear a lot is that it's hard to get all of leadership on board. Like I've heard like yes, like the chief's on board, the assistant chief's on board, but half the sergeants don't care or don't, how do you get the entire leadership team to follow that same mission and, in a way that, reaches the entire organization and is aligned? Is there like a strategy, or is it just like, this is the why get on board?
No, no, there's definitely a strategy to all of it. And I'll tell you that it what has worked for me is the work of having really honest conversations with sergeants, right? Understanding the culture of the organization, getting to know people, building trust and building relationships, and then having what I've done is I've had these day away with the sergeants of the organization. And depending on the size of the organization, sometimes it takes a couple of days to get through it. But the purpose of that was really to build a cohesion on the message and alignment on the thoughts about where we were going, and an understanding that this is what I want, this is where we need to go in order to help our members be the best that they can be, have successful outcomes, right? The public is demanding near perfection out of our police officers day in and day out. Like get it right, literally 9.5 times out of 10. Like we're right up there with airline pilots and surgeons, right? Do not make a mistake when you're going and responding to a call for service that could have a bad outcome. Like our officers are finely attuned to that responsibility because people's lives are on the line. And in order to do that, in order to get us to that place, everyone's got to be behind ensuring that those officers have everything they can to be successful. So it's the training, it's the support, it's the equipment, it's the culture. And you can't get to that place until you have an alignment between the command staff, the sergeants, and the executive team. And so I would take advantage of consultants and day away events to preach and talk about the same thing. And repeating the message obviously is important.
Mm.
So at every command staff meeting that I had with our upper level command, and it included nearly, 25, 30 people, I'd repeat that message. And by the way, I began to institute some things that made it so that we were highlighting and showcasing the best of the best every quarter that we had these meetings. So we started a employee of the quarter, which is not new in many organizations, but this one didn't have that. And being able to that at that one day, be able to recognize employees from the different divisions, professional staff and sworn, was again a part of that reinforcement about how we needed to move forward as a team to support our officers so that it could be successful. It's not easy. I mean, to where we're at today took 4 years. And I think that that's the other key component in this is that changing or building an organization to the next level does take, sometimes 4 to 5 years, depending on the state of the organization when you take it over.
Yeah. Someone said to me one time, and I really liked this, and I'm going to call myself out a little bit. I have been told that I am hard on people, that I have really high expectations for people in my life. And it's been one of those aha moments where someone had to kind of shake me down and be like, you're really like you have really high expectations and it's really hard. And I'm like, okay, like maybe I need to readjust. But someone told me that if you set the bar and the level of expectations, that people will rise to that level. And so it's kind of asking yourself, like, what is that level that you want people to reach, whether that's professionally or personally, and people will rise to that level. But if they don't know where that level is, then there's no goal, right? There's no way to get there if you don't set those expectations of like, hey, this is how we want it to be. This is our goal. This is where we're trying to get to. And then there's kind of that like North Star of like, okay, like how do we work backwards to figure out how we can achieve that highest level of expectation that we're setting for ourselves? And I really liked that. I thought that that was like a really cool way to put it of like, hey, people want to do a good job. People want to excel in the things that they're doing. But one of the things that you said that I think is really important is having positive reinforcement for things. I think that so often we've gotten so used to calling people out for their shortcomings and we forget that like we need that as human beings. Like we need to know that the good things that we're doing and the successes that we have are recognized. And so I like that you said like we're, trying to have these like leaderboards and we're trying to like make sure people like feel valued and seen and that we're celebrating wins. I think that we forget that. We forget how powerful that is to have someone look at you and say you did a good job, because of course we can always get better, but if you're just living day in and day out and all you're hearing is what you're doing wrong, it's really hard to rise to that level of expectation when you feel like you keep getting kind of, brought down along the way.
Everything you said is so spot on. It is very important to have a vision, something that is, high and hard to achieve, but that's the reason why it's a vision. And it's okay to be able to, lead your team to that vision, right? Or towards it. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. So we can have a vision, we can love our people, and we can hold them to account in a way that makes it so that all of us are going to get to where we need to be. And as you start to get to those stages, it's very, very important to celebrate the wins and to recognize people. A day never went by during my time in Santa Monica where I did not put out an email or send a message to somebody or send a text to somebody after I read about something that had occurred throughout the night or throughout the week, that just was a way to say, hey, two things, right? I'm paying attention, I'm watching, and by the way, you did a great job on this case. Thank you for what you did. I think it goes a long way because as human beings, like I think we want to look forward to somebody just recognizing us for a second. Um, as I was getting ready to leave here recently, the department, one officer took me aside and he said, I want you to know that I saved every message that you sent me. And it meant the world to me that you would recognize the work that I was doing. So thank you for that. And of course, I wasn't doing it for those reasons. I was doing it because I wanted to make sure that he knew that his work was valued. So I think that it should not be a lost art to recognize the good work that our folks are doing every single day, as it matters. It matters to them.
Well, I think that's so powerful to have someone come up and say that. And I think the key to that is that you weren't looking for that. You were just trying to, do the best job and support the people around you. And there's that authenticity to it. I don't think that any of us go around being like, I hope if I do this now, that like in 10 years someone's going to say I changed their life, like you very rarely get any of that feedback, with the work that you do. But I think it goes back to, I think it's human nature. Anyone can relate to this. Like if if you don't feel like there are people in your corner that want you to succeed, w- where is our motivation to do anything?
Yeah.
Like if you're working with anyone for anyone and you're like, man, like no one really cares about what I do. All I hear, the only time I hear from anyone is if it's bad. Like I don't get recognized, like no one's in my corner, no one wants me to win, no one wants me to succeed. I think that's when you start to see lower productivity. I think that's when you start to see people leaving or negativity, morale being low, because like it's human nature, we all want to feel like people want us to win and that they want us to succeed and that the efforts that we are making are being recognized. And it seems so simple, but I think that we forget about it sometimes.
I didn't forget, when you were talking and describing that feeling, you just took me back, years and years ago as a patrol officer in a large police department and feeling as though nobody was there to support me and nobody cared. And the only thing that kept me going was that internal drive that said, hey, we're doing this for a reason. This is your profession. You believe in it, and this is the right thing to do. But it was an uphill battle because I didn't have the kind of support that I was really craving, like you're
Yeah.
describing. And I think that I never forgot what those experiences felt like. And I got to tell you, whether you're a police officer, on the ground 30 years ago or 3 months ago, the challenge is still the same, right? You're dealing with human beings, people that get themselves in trouble, people that don't want to go along. And there you are at the front end of trying to fix things that are often not your fault and very, very difficult to deal with. And so to now be in a position where I can help officers in that stage, in that space, be the best that they can be and be supportive for them is unlike anything that I experienced. And to this day, it's kind of what drives me to do my best. So thank you for reminding me of that. I did go through that.
Well, and my question is, what if that officer doesn't have that internal fire? What if that officer doesn't have any fight left in them? I think that's the whole point. It's like there are people who are good people who are leaving the career because they don't have that, and they're like, what's the point? And they don't have that internal drive. And like we said before, I think that it, unfortunately, sometimes we have to go through those things and those adversities to understand what it feels like to be able to then help other people to not feel that way. And if
Yeah.
you didn't have that experience, you wouldn't maybe have the same sort of empathy that you do now of understanding, what that's like and not wanting other people to go through that. One of the other things that you said earlier that I wanted to touch on, and I haven't forgotten, was this idea that it takes time and effort. And I think that we're in this world of instant gratification right now. Like I I've thought about this a lot lately, and I don't know if this is because I'm getting older or what is going on. I'm like midlife crisis or something, but I'm thinking about how simple life felt when I was younger, and how much time I felt like I had, and um, how much more present I was in my life when I was younger. And I think that technology is great. I think that it has left me personally, and I think a lot of other people very distracted. I think that we rely so heavily on our phones, and anytime I have a question, I'm like, I'm just going to chat GPT it, and then I have the answer. Whereas before there was maybe a little bit more critical thinking going on of like, can I figure this out on my own? And I think we've gotten so used to things, Amazon arriving in 4 hours at our doorstep, that there isn't that understanding that really good things, and I think the best things in life, take time and effort, and it's not instant gratification. Any relationship that you have, like the idea is that over time it gets better, hopefully, and like, there's more depth to it. And I was having a conversation with a team recently, and they made a comment. They're like, yeah, this just sounds like it's going to take a lot of time and effort. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
100% it is. Like it's not going to consume your entire day every day. But yes, like these things, these initiatives, like these changes that you're wanting to make, like they take time, they take effort, and you have to be willing to put in that time and effort. It's not something that you can just throw out there and check a box and it's going to be successful. It's trial and error, and it's that constant reinforcement that you talked about before, and continuing to spread the message over a long period of time that's going to get you the results and that ROI that you're looking for. And so I appreciated that you said that, because I think that sometimes people don't do things because they're like, man, it's going to take time and effort, and we don't have the time. And while we do think that maybe it's worth the effort, I don't know, like maybe that's a problem for later.
Every team that I've led has has been challenging in the beginning. But if there's one thing about me is that I'm very persistent in a way that I think, and as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at being patient with the process and allowing for time and space to go by in order to accomplish the things that we need to accomplish. Like I said, I think that we can get to where we need to be. It's a situation where we can be persistent, demand, the accountability and have high standards with clarity, of course, right off the bat, making sure people know what we want to accomplish, but at the same time, never really taking your foot off the gas. At the same time, you're taking care of people and moving forward. And I've seen it happen over and over again. No team I started with was, ready and willing to take on everything that I was talking about. But over time, everyone came around and we've been successful, and I feel really good about it.
Yeah. Well, I know there's a couple, I feel like we're running short on time, and I knew this was going to happen because I had so many notes that I wanted to cover with you. But I'll ask one final question, and then I'll let you take the floor if I missed anything, if you want to add anything. But my final question for you is for the younger generation. What words of wisdom would you share with someone who's earlier in their career? Maybe if you could reverse time and go back 40 years and give your younger self words of wisdom, maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier, or something that's helped you along the way.
Yeah, I think that a couple of things come to mind. One of them is that I wish that I would have learned early on, the importance of being able to pick yourself up and dust yourself off when there is a failing. Because when I look back on my career, there were certainly way more times that I've made mistakes and failed. And the only thing that helped me through that period was the fact that I got myself up and recognized that I needed to make changes, and move forward. Because without that, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And I think that that is really, really important, right? Recognizing that you're going to make mistakes, you're going to fail, you're going to fall on your knees. But what sets you apart from everybody else is going to be your ability to get back up and get back in to whatever it is you're doing, and move forward without looking back, and without regrets. but making obviously the changes you need to make in order to be successful. Um, I would say that that is to me one of the biggest attributes that I've had in my career that have helped me. I would also say that the changes that come in our profession are all meant to give us new challenges. And as we look at the landscape of a new officer and you think about, different units or ideas about where you want to go, I would say that you need to go out there and get yourself out of the comfort zone and go out there and try it.
Mhm.
Because as you do that, the time that it takes for you to learn a new job, a new assignment, the time behind you is flying by. You don't even realize that time is going by because you're experiencing a new challenge, a new part of the career, a new part of the job, and you're learning something. And then when you finally get to a good space, realize that it's maybe time to test yourself again and to go out there and do something different. I'm blessed that my entire career has been like that. Every time that I, mastered something, I saw an opportunity to start something new, something different, and I went after it. And I look back on my time and it feels like it flew by. And
Mhm.
that is part and parcel to the reason why I tell you that it feels like the first day of sitting in briefing, and I still have that fire because I think that there's still so much more to do, and I go after it every time I get a chance. So, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you because I think that, I think we've really nailed a few items, a few topics here that I think are really relevant to our profession today. And I hope that it helps someone else, another leader, another officer that's looking to get the most out of their career in policing.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate your time. And there's so many things that you said that I just resonate with so much. And I think one thing I do want to kind of touch on is what you said about failure. I think that we're so afraid to fail. And sometimes that failure is the very reason why we succeed. And now I feel like not saying that it's fun to fall on your knees and fail, but I kind of accept that as a part of success is like anyone that you see at the top, every single leader, every single person at the top of their game. This could even be someone who's a professional athlete, it doesn't have to be someone in law enforcement. This could be someone who's just elite.
Yeah,
They probably failed a lot along the way. And I love what you said, dust it off and you keep going. And to me, that's what resiliency is.
yeah,
It's like, how do you get back to baseline as quickly as possible so that you can keep moving forward? And I think that a lot of what we talked about today is kind of along those lines. How do you keep going? How do you keep that fire? How do you stay connected to the mission and the why? And how do you create longevity in your career and in your life? So I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your experience. And it's so fun to meet someone who's from my state. I know you're not here anymore, but thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
thank you, Paige. It's been amazing. You're right about resiliency because at the end of the day, we are trying to make sure that our men and women in policing have the resiliency to make it to 20, 25 years on their own accord and be able to retire when they're ready to go. And the only way we're going to get there because of the stress of the work. You're right. The work out in the public space is very difficult, and we're working to get better and better internally with the organization and minimize that stress internally. But the resilience for them to be able to make it to 20, 25 years is why we're working on all these programs. And the conversations that you're bringing to the fore, I think, are really important towards that end. And so, again, thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We'll
Thanks.
stay in touch for sure.
Okay.